Today's class is going to be slightly different. We are going to have it make second. We're going to have it based more of essay writing. We are going to be writing a full essay in today's class. We're taking a look at two pivotal lessons that I think will be a foundation for future activities that we do. When we do come back and we write mini essays, I want them to be focused on critical lenses. So going forward in each future class, we'll be taking a look at how we can possibly explore different critical lenses. Here we are covering majority of them in one video, and then after that, we're watching another video that talks about two different types of critical lenses. So by understanding critical lenses, we are going to be much better prepared to write literary analysis essays. That's overall the main goal. And even in the future, when we do write mini essays, when we're able to focus on specific topics, it just puts us at in a better position, honestly. Those of you that do gain experience, I mean, of course, anyone that puts in any attempt is going to gain an experience. And Anna, I see that you joined in as well. I sent in a link. But anyone that puts in any effort into actually attempting to understand these critical lenses and connecting them with sources of material that they read, or even in cases sometimes watched, or any type of literature that you've consumed. When you're able to put these connections together through the perspective of critical lenses, you're putting yourself for a major advantage when it comes to writing actual literary analysis essays. Okay, sure, Anna, no worries. Most of today's lesson is going to be essay writing, so I'm just expecting the best responses to be sent in. So you don't have to worry too much about reading. A lot of today is also going to be listening. I would recommend everyone here take notes as well. As we can imagine, for these classes, we typically don't stray away from the SAT format. So when we do, it's usually for an important lesson. So a lesson like this would come like maybe once a month, maybe once even every 2 months. But when we do go through this lesson, it will be the foundation for our next 4 to 5 classes at least. Because after we do the SAT, we most likely do a mini writing activity. So in this case, for the next 4 weeks at least, we are going to be writing mini essays. And in each of these mini essays, an excerpt similar to what we're taking a look at will be provided, and you would be told to write from a specific critical lens. Here we have the options to choose, but going forward in those classes, I will give one critical lens, like the feminist lens, the Marxist lens, psychoanalytic lens, post-colonial lens. Those will be provided, and we will be doing our essays from that perspective. So let's take a look at this video first. I have been talking a lot here. Let me just go ahead and send in the link so you have a reference to the YouTube video as well. And yeah, let me go ahead and click play. Just give me a second. If anyone's having trouble hearing anything, please let me know in the chat. Anna, are you able to hear the video?
No.
Okay. Alina, thank you for letting me know. Let me just go ahead and that's so weird. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm just going to try this again. I'm not sure why like it's only literally with this Zoom login I'm able to present videos to other classes, so it's not wrong with my devices. So I'm not sure because I prepared this class with these videos in mind. These videos are essential for us to watch. So I'm going to try again to play it. If you're able to hear it, please let me know in the chat. Type one in the chat if you could hear it, and type two if you cannot hear it. Um, yeah, there are, but I would prefer everyone's able to hear it rather than read through. I checked even with the Zoom settings and stuff too. It has to be something on the account side, and I will be telling them about how this is extremely how this gets in the way because now that I remember, it was specifically this class where we had the same exact issue where I could not play a video, and I will be complaining to the academy about how extremely concerning this is. But I'm going to just most likely join from another device, like I think I did last time, and try sharing it from there. So just give me 1 second because I think when I share it from my phone, for some reason it works. I know it's definitely related to this account because I did play a video just a couple of days ago for a different class. So just give me 1 second, and then I'm going to join into this.
At a relatively new field of study for literature called critical lenses. I say relatively new because it was introduced in the 1950s and people have been adding to lenses as
Wait, so
about the 70s or 80s. There are 8 different types of lenses minimum. However, we are only going to be looking at 4. If you do look through your handout, you'll see some of the 8. They're all very interesting. Just for the sake of our purposes, there's 4 main ones that we are going to be looking at. It takes your reading to a different level. You're not necessarily reading now to just read the plot and enjoy it or to find symbols. You're reading it to take on a new perspective, to take on a new idea. So like I said, we're going to be focusing on 4, and I'm going to briefly introduce these 4. It's said that no two people or persons ever read the same book. And while that might sound a little bit odd, because we've all read The Crucible, we've all read Huck Finn, and we're all going to be reading Gatsby, Of Mice and Men, and parts of Grapes of Wrath, we're still going to read them differently. Our perspectives are going to make our understanding of it different. And my understanding of Great Gatsby is going to be different than yours because of what my life experiences have put me through and how I'm reading it. So, like we've said, there are several lenses that people use to look at literature. So when I say lens, think of it like glasses. So you've born with a pair of clear lenses, and as you grow up and experience things, you've added to your lenses, and this changes how you've perceived everything around you. It can be something as simple as you hate strawberries until you tried them, or you had a close family member go to jail, and now you interpret criminals and the justice system differently. How you see the world interprets movies and books is based on your lenses. You see specific things because of your experience. So think of it like this. If we read some gushy, mushy, just cloyingly sweet love poem, people are going to experience it differently. People who are in new relationships or have a crush on someone that they might not know that well are going to read it and say, oh, this is us, this is about our life. While people who might be in established relationships might look at it and say, this really isn't how romance is, or these people are still in the honeymoon stages of their relationship, or versus someone who is anti-love or anti-relationship or who just broke up with someone might look at it and say, this is stupid, I don't like this isn't how life is. All of them have different lenses, so that could be a love lens or a relationship lens. We are going to focus on 4 different lenses, and they are papers. They are your reader response lens, so your personal meaning for it, socioeconomic or Marx or class lens, so looking for socioeconomic issues, historical lens, reading the text for its contextual significance, and gender or feminist lens, so it's gender issues and how it relates towards gender. So your reader response lens, and for those of you who are gone today and watching this, I will be giving you a packet of this, and for the rest of you, go to your packet, the 8 critical lenses through which readers can view text, the second page. So reader response. You're reading a text for personal meaning. So how does it affect you? How is your impact going to be different? How is my impact as an adult who's gone through college and who's gone through life and has experienced a lot? How's my interpretation going to be different from you, a high school student who has, frankly, maybe hasn't experienced quite as much as I have? Now, that's not always going to be true. It's not that black and white, but for the purpose of this, you get what I'm saying. So in what ways is this text familiar to your life? How is it different to your life? How did it affect you? What did it make you think? What did it make you feel? What did you notice when you were reading? And has it increased your interest in the subject matter, or has it changed your worldview? If you think back to last year in your lit circles, maybe you read The Long Way Gone about the child soldiers. Maybe that changed something. Maybe that changes what you think of what goes on in different parts of the world. And maybe you're going to go travel and help and see what kind of difference you can make. Maybe it's made you more of a dark, upset person. Maybe it's made you angry, and that's totally fine too. Socioeconomic or cultural, I also want you to add Marxist to this. Focusing on a text's socioeconomic issues, and remember, the socioeconomic issues are the class or the money, or how does our money or how does our social stature change this? So on your packet, you should have next to it these additional questions written down. Who has the power and the money? Who does not? And what is the result of that because of this? So because someone else is rich and someone is poor, that contributes to the story and that contributes to the plot. So someone today gave an example of Cinderella. Cinderella is abused because her family's left her, so her evil stepmother treats her poorly. And it's because of their class differences. So think about stuff that you have read where maybe you see people are treated poorly because of it. So like I said, this one is Marxist. That's the title we're going to be focusing on. In Hunger Games, how were the people treated? District 1, 2, 3, 4, they're a little bit more wealthy. They've got better clothes, they've got better houses, versus District 11 and 12, they're very poor. How are their lives different? How does that affect their abilities in the games? Gender. This one we are really going to refer to as feminist. That's what most of the scholars look at. They look at the feminist point of view. This focuses on the text gender-related issues or attitude towards genders. The assumption here is that men and women are different. They write differently, read differently, and write about their reading differently. These differences should be valued. In Huck Finn, we can see a lot of feminist lenses throughout this. We can see it in the beginning when Tom says they'll kidnap women and be nice to them and they'll fall in love with them. Because women, apparently, all you need to do is be nice to them and they fall in love with you. It's that easy. When Huck dresses up as a girl, he goes and meets Judith Loftus to find out information, and she asks him to kill a rat. He hits the rat, or barely misses it, and she says, I knew it, you're a boy, because if you were a girl, you would have been 8 feet off. They're making assumptions. In this case, they're both kind of negative. Now, it doesn't always have to be that way, but usually that's the way it does happen to go. Think of many of your classic Disney movies. They portray a woman, she's a damsel in distress, her prince comes, kisses her, saves her, rescues her, or the movies about her finding a relationship. A lot of it focuses on the idea of the patriarchy, so please write that word down and understand that the patriarchy is the society or government that is ruled by men. So it focuses on the idea that women might be inferior to men, even though we know that's not true. A lot of times that's what the idea is. Historical, biographical. So historical and biographical very much are the same. Biographical is obviously more about the author's life and author's experiences, while historical is going to be about what people are going through at that time. The author probably did live through it, but not always. It focuses on a text's contextual significance. This would include information about the author, his or her historical moment, or the systems of meaning available at the time of writing. So for the Crucible, if you were to read The Crucible without any knowledge of McCarthyism or the Red Scare or communists, you would just think it would be a play about witch hunting. But because you have that knowledge, you know that Joseph McCarthy was a senator who wanted to get rid of all the communists, and you know that people were treating their neighbors left and right, you understand that's where Arthur Miller got the idea for The Crucible. He did not live in the 1600s. He did not live through this. He was alive in the 1950s. So this is why he wrote The Crucible as an allegory for the modern day witch hunts. Instead of being people, Russians, it's witches. We talked about The Great Gatsby and how that takes place about 7 years before the Great Depression. So understanding how these people could live so extravagantly might make sense as to why the Great Depression did happen. It's a contributing factor to it. This new criticism is not something that you and we are going to focus on, but it is interesting to read about it and just make sure that
Okay. Um, 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 Sorry, a second. Right. Yeah, okay, that should not be an issue anymore. But yeah, this was quite a little bit of a hassle just to go ahead and share my screen. I will look into how we're going into class. If a lot of you have to leave near the end, then I will not extend class. But if so, I'm willing to extend class by 10 minutes up until 8:40, just because of the lost time that we did have. Again, I will be contacting the team. I only came in the impression that I would be able to obviously share my screen because I did it for another class just 2 classes ago, I think on Thursday. So it makes no sense at all. It's weird that I could share it on my phone, but not on my laptop. So yeah, I will definitely get it figured out because before I was in the impression it was my device, but the fact that it did work for me and it doesn't work here, it just doesn't make any sense. But going through what we just went after exploring what we just went through, we have 4 different lenses here. It might not be the exact same point for point in terms of what she talked about, but these lenses are the ones that I chose. The feminist lens, Marxist lens are mentioned over there, and even post-colonial to some extent not fully explored. And then there's psychoanalytic lens. All 4 of this, I think, is extremely important for us to explore. So these are the 4 that I brought up over here. What we're going to be doing is basing this off Atticus's closing argument from To Kill a Mockingbird. So Atticus would be the lawyer who's advocating. Can't forget. I think for something Robinson, for Tim Robinson. I feel like I hopefully I'm not saying his name incorrectly, but we're practically reading this closing argument. So just this final paragraph, and just to give some context, I'm sure most of you know about the story, but To Kill a Mockingbird, there is someone who's wrongly accused of a crime due to his race, and this is during a time when America has civil unrest, and we're able to see that there's a lot of unfairness, prejudice going on along that time, and we have Atticus over here defending for the equality, practically regardless of someone's race or skin color. So I want everyone to analyze the following passage using one of the critical lenses below. Write a well-developed paragraph explaining how your assigned lens shapes the interpretation of Atticus's speech. It's saying to use at least one direct quote. Obviously, the quote would be used from over here. But there is one way in this country in which all men are created equal. There is one human institution that makes a pauper the equal of a Rockefeller, right? So a Rockefeller would be someone from the Rockefeller family, and of course, they're extremely rich and powerful. The stupid man the equal of an Einstein, and the ignorant man the equal of any college president. That institution, gentlemen, is a court. So you're only analyzing the passage. You don't need to write about what happened before or after. You don't need to do research into that. You're simply analyzing this passage with a lens of your choice. So you have the opportunity to look at this from a feminist lens. How does Atticus's speech reflect or ignore the role of women in justice and society? How might this argument be different if a woman were making it? Marxist lens. How does Atticus use class differences to appeal to the jury? Does this speech suggest true equality or does it reinforce existing power structures? Psychoanalytic lens. What underlying fears or emotion does Atticus appeal to in the jury? How does this appeal to the logic, contrast with the town's deep-seated biases? Post-colonial lens. How does Atticus's speech reflect racial power structures in Macomb? Does this appeal to justice challenge or reinforce the dominance of white voices in the courtroom? And I want everyone to write their response as a thoughtful paragraph using a direct quotation for support. The direct quote would be the quote mentioned. You don't need to quote the entire thing, but rather just if you're pointing out a certain phrase or word, which you have to, of course, since you are writing about that quote, then you would highlight that portion in your writing. So what I'm going to do over here is copy and paste this into the chat, and then I'm going to stay on this slide. Before we get started, does anyone have any questions about this activity? Okay, we'll work on this for 10 minutes. Shannon, go ahead.
I have the link to the slideshow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and send that in. Okay, so right now the time is 7:30. We'll work on this activity until 7:40. If anyone does have any questions at any point, feel free to ask me. Okay, just a reminder, in 3 minutes we will be taking up this activity. Okay, can everyone please go ahead and send in their responses? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read this. From a Marxist perspective, Atticus Finch uses class differences in To Kill a Mockingbird to persuade the jury by highlighting how Mayella Ewald, through poor, still holds power over Tom Robinson because of race. He appeals to the jury as white men within this hierarchy, asking them to rise above prejudice, but only within the courtroom, while he suggests that all men are equal. This equality is limited and does not challenge the broader social system. As a result, his speech appears to support justice, but ultimately reinforces existing power structures by trusting those in power to act fairly rather than calling for real change. Okay, this is a good start, but there are certain points that I want to write out over here. So I don't have any direct changes to make, so let me just make a separate slide and then write the points out. And everyone else, I still have not received any responses. We do have another one to get through before we watch a different video. So please do make sure you submit your response. All right, and you mentioned over here Mayella's poverty. But what we should really specifically address is how Atticus uses the comparison between even something like Popper and Rockefeller, and he makes a couple more after, even to Einstein and a stupid person, and someone who's uneducated and someone who's high up within a college administration. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but like it was three different comparisons that was made over there. So I'm gonna write over here, make a specific reference to how Atticus uses the class differences through comparisons to appeal to the jury. And I'm just to be a little bit more specific, I'm going to bring up over here the Rockefeller and Popper example. And I also want to add another thing. It's just because you chose the Marxist lens, there is see what we see that's interesting over here is in this quote specifically, he says that institution, gentlemen, is a court. When looking at something from the Marxist lens, it's important to look at who is being addressed because that's how we kind of understand who is in control, who is in power at the situation. So Atticus addressing the jury as gentlemen, acknowledging their status as the ruling class of the town, kind of shows us the reinforcement of the hierarchy. And we also kind of are able to even relate this back to a patriarchal society, right? So I think that would be an important factor to bring up since you did choose to analyze this from a Marxist lens. So since you chose to analyze this from the perspective of the Marxist of a Marxist lens, or yeah, I'm just gonna write of the Marxist lens, you have to make reference to the fact that Atticus acknowledges the jury as gentlemen, acknowledging the existence of hierarchy among this patriarchal society. All right, and Anna, do you have any questions about these 2 points of improvement? If you do, you can let me know in the chat since you are not able to talk. And Shannon, can you go ahead? Let me just paste this and make it bigger. Just give me a second. Yeah, can you go ahead and read your response?
Using Marxist lens, Atticus's argument highlights class differences while suggesting the court erases them. He claims the courtroom makes a pauper the equal of a Rockefeller, appealing to the idea that justice rises above wealth and status. However, this idea overlooks how power will shape outcomes. The all-white jury holds social and economic authority, so Atticus's quote basically reassures them that the system's fair rather than truly challenging the inequality.
Really good job with your response. I'm glad that you made the exact reference to the previous point that I was talking about, which is the best point amongst there to bring up when it comes to looking at the Marxist lens. So it's really good that you were able to choose that specific phrase from that quote. I'm just trying to see if there's anything specific that I would add on to this. This is a really good response as it is. Okay, maybe just to this sentence, we could further expand this to better just connect the idea of the quote. So I just want to write a different sentence instead. And I think it would just, let's, whatever I write right now, I want to make sure that it best explains the quote, even if it goes on for a little bit of a lengthy sentence. So maybe we can just write, however, this idealistic vision ignores the material reality that a pauper lacks the capital and social influence necessary to navigate a legal system designed by and for the wealthy. All right. So that is practically kind of summed up by the sentence you wrote. However, this idea overlooks how power still shapes outcome, right? But when we read a general sentence like that, we have to, as the audience, make the connection. It's like, okay, so they talk about how a pauper and a Rockefeller are equal, but here you're saying this idea overlooks how power still shapes outcome. But then we have to make the connection of how do you get to there? You know, like what are you talking about in terms of power? Who has power? Why? What does the power imbalance do? How does this directly apply to someone who could be seeing something in the matter of court? So this sentence, on the other hand, goes into specific examples, makes a reference back to that exact reference of Popper and Rockefeller, and talks about how the system is designed to really help out in terms of the wealthy. And if you really are poor, you're not getting far in terms of the system. So that was the main change I wanted to make. And Shannon, do you have any questions about that point of improvement?
No.
Okay. Okay, Alina, can you go ahead and read your response?
In this passage, Atticus strategically appeals to the jury's superego, the human conscience that strives for moral perfection and societal ideals, to fight against the irrational biases of their id. By evoking names like Rockefeller and Einstein, he creates a temporary psychological safe space where the jurors can envision themselves as part of an enlightened intellectual elite instead of a group of prejudiced citizens. Atticus attempts to use logic and reason to bypass the town's projection, a defense mechanism where the community places its own dirtiness and failures onto Tom Robinson. He appeals to the jurors' unconscious desire for status by telling them the court makes them the equal of any college president. He offers them a sense of narcissistic gratification. If they follow the law, they are elevated. If they follow their prejudice, they are ignorant. Ultimately, Atticus tries to soothe their underlying fear of inferiority, using the institution of the court as a symbol of power to provide a form of psychological relief that transcends their social and economic realities.
Okay. Really good job with your response and great explanation of the concepts you bring up as well, which is really important to do when introducing these topics. I would just want to change two sentences. I do think they're good sentences, but again, similar to what I did with Shannon, I want to better connect it back to the main topic or like the main lens you're looking at it from. So, in terms of this sentence, we could further improve it by maybe even writing Atticus utilizes the court's formality to disrupt the community's projection yeah kind of we'll keep it as similar to your sentence for this portion, a defense mechanism. And rather than right where the community places its own dirtiness and failures onto Tom Robinson, this is where we could kind of expand and connect it better with your ideas. Instead, maybe we could write a defense mechanism that allows the jurors to externalize their own perceived moral failures by casting Tom Robinson as the embodiment of social deviance. Okay, so what we see over here is just a little bit more specific terminology being used. I remember the concept of social deviance being brought up, especially the idea of almost kind of pushing responsibility or pushing their own moral failures onto a certain person would be well described as social deviance. But compared to using general words like dirtiness and failures, yes, they can be powerful, but at the same time, that's not the only thing we're going for. We're trying to make sure we connect back to the main topic and the critical lens. So by using certain terminology like this, we are making a stronger point. And even over here, I think there is an opportunity to, let me see, he offers them a sense of, okay, I would slightly word this differently because I want to introduce a different concept. It's just, I don't want to, I was thinking of adding it onto this sentence, but then it would definitely become a run-on sentence. So maybe if you word this differently, let me try doing it. Okay. So if I start off by wording, by promising that the court makes them the equal, the e the equal of any college president, Atticus offers the jurors a narcissistic gain, incentivizing them to choose the moral superego over the ID's impulsive prejudice toward the reward of elevated status. So it's really just the same point that you're making using the specific terminology and also making references to points that you bring up earlier. So therefore, overall, making a more fulfilling response as well. Okay, and Alina, do you have any questions about the provided points of improvement? Okay, I'm just going to split this up into a different slide. Give me a second. Okay, and thanks for letting me know. Okay, Dora, can you go ahead and read your response?
Through a post-colonial lens, Atticus Finch's speech shows how racial power structures control justice and make hope. Atticus argues that the court should treat all people equally, saying, in this country, our courts are the great levelers. This statement suggests that the legal system is supposed to be fair to everyone, regardless of race. However, the outcome of the trial proves that this idea is not true in reality. Even though Atticus presents clear evidence that Tom Robinson is innocent, the all-white jury still finds him guilty. This shows that white voices in power still dominate the courtroom, no matter what the law is supposed to represent. Atticus's speech challenges racism by appealing to fairness and logic, but it also reveals the limits of justice in a society built on inequality. Overall, Atticus's argument highlights the gap between the idea of justice and the reality of racial inequality in Macomb.
Okay, great job with your response. I just want to connect some sentences better to the critical lenses. So in this case, post-colonial lens, which is a great one for this topic for sure. I want to just change one of the sentences over here. This shows that white voices and power still dominate the courtroom, no matter what the law is supposed to represent. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can cross this out. And then starting from there, we'll keep the same idea, but just better connect it to the topic. So instead, we could write, this illustrates the hegemony of white colonial authority, where even a court defined as a great leveler remains a tool for the dominant culture to suppress the subaltern. So that's like referring to people who are often in marginalized groups, overseen groups. So subaltern voice of Tom Robinson. All right, so uh, again, your previous sentence, yes, it can be slightly powerful, the idea of talking about white voices and power dominating the courtroom. But this goes into more specifics, talking about almost a system that was created through white colonial authority and the fact that even court, which is meant to be a leveler between people, right? The whole idea of a court system is to make sure no matter what position you're in, you are equal at that moment when you're standing there, regardless of whoever is standing against you. But it goes to show that due to this dominant culture from the white colonial authority, it's impossible not to suppress the subaltern, so that marginalized group. It's impossible not to suppress their voice. Okay, and I want to see if there's any other sentences I could change. Okay, maybe we could change the last bit of this sentence, but it also reveals limits of justice in a society built on inequality. So it's a little bit of a general sentence. It shows us, yes, there is a problem, but it doesn't get into the very specifics of where the problem is coming from and how it is still evident. So maybe we could write um, Atticus's speech challenges racism by appealing to his fairness and logic, but ultimately highlights how colonial legal frameworks often are often insufficient to provide true justice for those existing outside of white privilege. Something a little bit more specific, we're able to get a better understanding of the fact that, yes, this is obviously not fair. There's no sense of equality here, but we get into much more specific examples. So it's kind of just reiterating the same point again and again. Sure, some people can make connections, but as a writer, it's important for us to make those connections for the readers. And even as you continue to write these essays in the future, we do have to make sure we remember, like, it might seem as if we're reiterating the same point again and again, but making those connections by referencing those certain points are very, very important. So even here, again, referencing white privilege, referencing the colonial legal frameworks, and also referencing how this highlights that these frameworks are insufficient to provide true justice. It's very important to reiterate these points. All right, and Dora, do you have any questions about the provided points of improvement? Okay, if you do, please let me know in the chat. The next activity we're taking a look at is analyzing Lady Macbeth's soliloquy through critical lenses. The raven himself is hoarse, that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan. Under my battlements come you spirits that tend on moral thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the top full of driest cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my foul purpose, nor keep peace in between. Keep peace between. The effect and it come to my woman's breast and take my milk for gal, you murdering ministers. Wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief, come thick night and haul thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold. All right, so just to kind of give an idea, where over here where you kind of see Lady Macbeth talking about unsex me, so get rid of my gender. She is a woman who wants to do certain things, get certain things done, but has a limited position of power because of the fact that she is a woman, right? But as we see in the story, she does, even though she is a woman, she attempts to use the people in her life almost like pawns. She's able to use her son. She has a major role in the death of her husband. She's even able to use her husband's brother. So, like, she plays a major, powerful role. And here we kind of see the soliloquy actually about almost her detachment from her gender, talking about how this gender is limiting her, enforcing these boundaries in terms of what she's able to get done. But she's kind of almost yelling out to get rid of this limitations, this these restrictions on her. So I do think the first lens we could possibly look at from might be the easiest, the feminist lens. How does Lady Macbeth challenge or conform to gender roles? What does she mean by unsex me here? And how does this reflect societal expectations of femininity and power? Marxist lens, how does Lady Macbeth's ambition reflect class struggles? How does power and social hierarchy influence her desire to control fate? Psychoanalytic lens, what do her words reveal about her subconscious desires or fears? How does her rejection of remorse and nature connect to psychological conflict? Post-colonial lens, how does Lady Macbeth's invocation of supernatural forces relate to themes of control and fear of the other? And how does her language reflect anxieties about power and disruption? Before we get started, does anyone have any questions about this activity? Okay, right now the time is 8:03. We'll work on this until 8:13. After this, we're going to proceed with the take-up, and we'll see how long the take-up takes, but we are supposed to watch a video after as well. I will be able to extend class on my end, so for those of you that are able to stay, it would be great if you can stay. I'm guessing based off the pace we're going, most likely we'll spend majority of the class taking this up, and then I'll play the video after. There's two different videos. I'll try and play one of them, and we will most likely do an activity based off these two videos for next week. So in the case that you do have to leave early, what I'm going to do is I'm going to obviously leave these slides over here. You have access to it as well. I would recommend everyone does watch it for homework. So if you are not able to watch it, please do make sure you watch it for homework. And yes, sure, Anna, thanks for asking me. Okay, just a reminder, in 2 minutes we will be taking up this activity. Okay, the time is 8:13. Can everyone please go ahead and start sending in their responses? Okay, Shannon, can you go ahead and read your response?
Using feminist lens, Lady Macbeth's soliloquy reveals how she rejects traditional expectations of femininity in order to gain power. When she cries when sex me here, she asks to be stripped of the qualities associated with womanhood, such as compassion and nurturing, which she sees as obstacles to achieving her goals. By asking to replace her milk with ghee, she symbolically transformed maternal care into cruelty, challenging limited roles available to women in her society. From this perspective, her speech exposes how femininity is tied to weakness in a patriarchal system, forcing her to deny her gender entirely in order to pursue influence and gain control.
Great job with this response. I'm just going to add some points over here. I don't really have too many specific changes to make, so I just want to write certain points over here, which is first starting off by expanding on the why. Expand on why she must ask spirits to do this. Talk about how it suggests she believes her natural female state is a physical barrier she cannot overcome through will alone. Okay. And another thing I would also rate is make the connection that her request to sex herself is really is more a commentary on society and how it equates remorse exclusively to women. So it's almost as if women are meant to be remorseful, like exclusively to women, whereas men are not meant to be, which is of course not the case. But especially around that time, it's like men can do the most, they could be doing the worst things, and a woman would have to stand by and just kind of abide by these things. And for them to question it would be out of place, or out of what a society would be considered to be okay, which is of course not the case. And that's kind of what she's arguing against. Not to say she's a good person, she's definitely one of the more evil characters, but the point she's making is definitely just and fair. So let me also go ahead and paste in your response. And sorry, I'm just trying to get over these faster. I know I typically do spend a little bit more time, but I want to just make sure everyone gets to take up their responses. Anna, can you go ahead and read your response?
From a feminist lens, Lady Macbeth and Macbeth both challenges and reinforces traditional gender roles. She challenges them by rejecting the expectations of femininity, such as compassion, nurturing, and passivity. Instead, embraces traits associated with masculinity, like ambition and violence. When she says unsexy here, she's asking to be stripped of qualities society labels as feminine, particularly empathy and moral restraint, because she believes they would prevent her from gaining power. This reflects a world where power is coded as male, forcing her to deny her womanhood to achieve influence. However, her need to unsex herself also reinforces existing gender structure, since it suggests that strength and authority cannot coexist with femininity, ultimately highlighting the limitations placed on women rather than fully escaping them.
Okay, good job with your response. Just have some points of improvement to go over. All right, so starting off, just give me a sec. All right, so you can make a further connection between a rejection of gender and her appeal to the spirits, because it almost suggests that in this situation, escaping these gender roles in her society requires almost a supernatural transformation. So, talk about how she has to appeal to the spirits in terms of her rejection of her gender, and how escaping gender roles within the context, timeline, and society of this writing is shown as requiring a supernatural force, right? Like just to escape gender roles, the idea of communicating with spirits, do something of that sort, just goes to show how serious of an issue this was, and in general, how reinforced those gender roles were at that time. Okay, and I'm gonna also write over here, analyze the milk gal or gal reference to its full extent. To kind of recap, it's almost as if just want to make sure I have the exact definition of gal over here. So it's almost in a way talking about how for her to truly achieve power, she has to destruct the life-giving potential within herself. So for her to achieve power in her world, she must go through with the destruction of her life-giving potential. Okay, and let me go ahead and okay, Dora, can you go ahead and read your response?
Through a feminist lens, Lady Macbeth challenges traditional gender roles in her soliloquy. During Shakespeare's time, women were expected to be gentle, emotional, and obedient, but Lady Macbeth rejects these expectations. She asks the spirits to unsex me here, which shows that she believes femininity is a weakness that prevents her from gaining power. She wants to remove her kindness and replace it with cruelty so she can take control of the situation. This shows how limited women's roles were since she feels she must become less feminine in order to be strong. By calling on dark forces and asking to be filled with duress, cruelty, Lady Macbeth is trying to take on qualities that were usually associated with men. Overall, her soliloquy both challenges gender expectations and reveals how strict and limiting those roles were, showing that women had to reject their identity to gain power.
Okay, great job with your response. I do have similar points to include over here. I just want to include this one main point, which is something I just went over right now, so no point in me repeating myself, but the analysis between to talk about something so powerful, almost to talk about the fact that she has to take away her motherhood to feel that sense of power or to get into that realm of power within her own world is a very powerful example. So to analyze that metaphor, I think would be essential. And I would also write over here, distinguish between gender and nature, elaborate on her request for the spirits to make thick my blood. She almost believes that feminine nature is a tangible obstacle to her ambition. Okay, and Alina, can you go ahead and read your response?
Through a feminist lens, Lady Macbeth's soliloquy serves as a radical subjection. I mean, I meant to write rejection of the Elizabethan ideal woman. She explicitly identifies her own biological femininity as the primary barrier to her political agency. By pleading with spirits to unsex her and change her milk for gall, she acknowledges the social reality that power is a masculine construct and empathy is a gendered weakness. She does not seek to become a man for the sake of identity. She wants to strip away the compunctious visitings of nature, the societal and biological expectations of Victorian era nurturance that prevents her from committing regicide. Her desire to thick her blood suggests that in a patriarchal structure, a woman's ambition is viewed as a literal violation of nature, forcing her to self-destruct to grab the seat of power.
Okay, great job with your response. I just have some small changes. First of all, it would not be in Victoria era. It would be can't pronounce it correct. It's like Jacobean era, or yeah, I'll just spell that over here. I'm just gonna put this. Okay, and even here, I would further define self-destruct. I'm just gonna highlight this in red and then write a point over here. And can everyone please let me know in the chat just by typing one if you have to leave and if you're able to stay until 8:40. Self-destruct, self-destruction, or clarify that her wish to self-destruct is specifically the erasure of femininity and connect this to her believing that the crown is a weight that only a masculinized body is perceived to bear. Okay. Okay, so it seems most of you do have to leave. So, all right, it is fine. Like I usually do only extend class up to that extent if it was a major mistake on my end. But in the case of this, it does feel like there's an issue with the Zoom account, so I will be letting the academy know. And I don't want to keep anyone past too long of a time. Instead, what I'm going to do is assign this for homework. Um, yeah, I really do recommend everyone does give this an attempt. We are most likely going to be looking at these two topics, or we might also revisit some of the lenses we already looked at, but there's a high chance that we're going to be taking a look at these activities right over here. So there's two different lenses that you'll be taking a look at, structuralism and post-structuralism. Okay, so structuralism is rooted in linguistic theory that argues that human culture and behavior are organized by underlying, stable, and universal structures of binary positions. So nature, culture, and so on. Whereas post-structuralism rejects this instability, arguing that meaning is fluid, context dependent, and constantly shifting with no single fixed truth. While structuralists seek objective scientific rules, post-structuralists emphasize instability and deconstruction. And structuralism is primarily, like we could see that primarily from 1950s to 1960s, and it's the belief that all cultural phenomena, including literature, myths, and fashion, are systems of science that can be analyzed like language. Whereas post-structuralism emerged as a critique of structuralism from 1960s to 1980s, arguing that structures themselves are not fixed and that language is inherently unstable. Okay, and I want to also go over the writing assignment before I do dismiss the class. All right, the essay is The Critical Lens. Topic is Power Dynamics in Literature. Select a literary text and analyze it through a specific critical lens. It can be Marxist, feminist, post-colonial, or psychoanalytic. How does your chosen lens reveal a conflict of power or identity within the text? Clearly state the text, the lens, and the specific power struggle. Analyze by focusing on how the text symbols or character arcs represent broader societal issues. For evidence, use at least 2 to 3 specific examples from your chosen literary text and avoid plot summary. Prioritize how the text subverts or reinforces a status quo. And I think everyone was doing a really good example of that today. Very little summarization going on and much more actual analyzation of the information we're looking at, and it didn't feel as if context was missing either. So it's a really good balance that everyone was able to achieve today. And in terms of the length for this writing assignment, it's suggested that it's about 600 words. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss the class. I hope everyone has a great week ahead of themselves.